Thank you for joining us today for the important conversation about the changing cannabis landscape and what it means for our communities, families, and youth. We would like to extend a special thank you to the Children's Services Council of Palm Beach County for their continued support of prevention initiative and community education efforts that makes events like this possible. We are excited to have our moderator, Stefany Valderrama. Stefany has been an anchor and reporter with CBS 12 News since January 2020. During her career, she has earned an Associate Press Award for her tornado coverage, helped a child fund a life-saving marrow donor through her reporting, and launched a hands-on journalism at a program for students at Alma Mater, Georgia Southern University. We are grateful to have her guide today's conversation and help facilitate this discussion among our experts at our panel. Stefany, thank you so much for being there, and I will pass this to you. Thank you again.
Yes. Thank you so much, Taisha. It is really my pleasure to be back again this year. And thank you to the Southeast Florida Community Coalitions and the Children's Services Council for really bringing us together for this really important conversation. So I want to say good afternoon. Welcome everyone to 710, the new 420. Many people are familiar with 420 and its connection to marijuana culture, but fewer people have heard of 710. Now, if you turn the number 710 upside down, it spells oil, which is why July 10th or 710 Day has become associated with cannabis oil, concentrate, waxes, and dabs. Now, these products are often significantly more potent than traditional marijuana and represent a rapidly changing cannabis landscape that, many parents, educators, and community members might not really be that familiar with. Now, today's marijuana products can come in many forms, including vape cartridges, concentrates, edibles, oils, beverages, and other products that often contain much higher levels of THC than what previous generations actually dealt with. So our goal today is to provide information, increase awareness, and really encourage informed conversations about today's marijuana products and their impact on youth, family, and our communities. Throughout today's event, we do encourage you to submit questions using the chat feature. We are going to reserve some time at the end of all of the presentations to get to as many questions as possible. So I do want to get started with our first speaker. So our first speaker today is Ellen Snelling. Ellen joined the Hillsborough County Anti-Drug Alliance to help prevent youth and adult substance misuse and really promote healthy communities. Now, she currently chairs the Tampa Alcohol Coalition, a subcommittee of the Hillsborough County Anti-Drug Alliance created in response to high rates of underage drinking and impaired driving crashes in Hillsborough County. Ellen also participates on the organization's Marijuana Task Force and Prescription Drug Abuse Task Force and volunteers with Mothers Against Drunk Driving in Hillsborough County. Additionally, she also serves on both the Florida Coalition Alliance and Florida Impaired Driving Coalition. Ms. Snelling received her Master's of Science degree in Dietetics from Florida International University. Please join me in welcoming back Ellen Snelling. So good to see you again. Oh, Ellen, you are still muted.
Am I good now? Okay. Thank you so much for the introduction, and I will get right to the screen. All right, can everyone see it and hear me? All right, great. So we're excited to be back here again today to talk about 710. Like Stefany said, oil spelled, upside down or backwards. It's just kind of crazy how the industry comes up with these things, but all it's about is using marijuana every way that you can, but specifically concentrate. So I'm going to talk about marijuana and hemp trends. The biggest trend is high potency THC. The higher, the better, according to the industry. So in the 1990s, THC content was only about 3.7%. Now, the flower can have 30% or higher. I've seen 35% in dispensaries. So marijuana extract goes 60% all the way up to even 99% THC. what do these products look like? In Florida, we don't have recreational marijuana, but we do have medical. And some people thought medical marijuana maybe is just like CBD or, they have different ideas of what it looks like. I want to show you what it looks like in some of the ads. So we have the Flamingo Kush, which is a pre-rolled flower. And you can see the flamingo as an advertisement. And then we have Happy Hour. This is all from True Leaf. So they have special prices at certain times of the day. And Cart Week, again, this is the concentrate that we were talking about, and they have specials on this. And just look at the ones down there that are in syringes. Those are the kind of products they're selling in medical marijuana dispensaries. Sometimes they have specials like Sunday morning, wake and bake. Does this sound medical? I'm just, throwing my comments in there, but this is what we have here in Florida. And then we have 10% off of all Blue River products. And this was a 710 ad. So for holidays, they have special ads. If you look down in the corner, we have St. Patrick's Day. You have mix and match, and it's your lucky day. And these are all the products you get. And a lot of them are concentrates. This is one of the focuses of the medical marijuana industry is our concentrates. And then you look at the one that says up your puffs. And the guy's head is just covered with a cloud of vape or smoke. And then the concentrate is dripping down. So again, and what is it called? Cheesequake, Gush Cake, Cakes and Cream. These are the names of the medical products. And then another ad that I found was Smile Wide, and it has like banana, it looks like a smiley face. And some of these things we have reported to Department of Health because it looks like it's kid friendly. Medical marijuana edibles. And just so you know, these are made with concentrates. So some of the products are very high in THC because the concentrates are put into them. And these are some of the ads. Get something sweet as a kiss. Sweet talk. The thing that's really good about our medical marijuana law is that it does limit the THC content of edibles. So it's only 10 milligrams per serving. I'm saying only, that's still a lot. And then 200 milligrams per package. And we're going to talk about hemp next, and there's no limits on that. And also they can't use coloring. As you can see, these are kind of, plain looking, and the packaging is good. So our medical marijuana edibles are actually pretty good and pretty well regulated, but the ads are not. So medical marijuana, if you want to get an update on the latest of, you can find out in your own community, like you can look up your county, see how many dispensaries that you have. And they have updates every week at the Office of Medical Marijuana Use, and that's under the Department of Health. So as of June 26th, there were over 933,000 patients in Florida. We have the biggest medical marijuana industry in the United States. There were 767 dispensaries, active treatment centers, there's 22. All of them have multiple dispensaries. So the news that happened in April 2026, and this is not good news, the Department of Justice rescheduled medical marijuana from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. This is because our president gave an executive order to do this. And I'm very disappointed. I know many of you are. And right now, it's actually before the DEA court system. And there's actively Sam and some others are fighting it to try to stop this movement. But it's already happening. And we'll just have to, whatever happens, we'll have to deal with it, and we'll have to continue with our prevention. Lawsuits have been filed. The DEA is holding the scheduling as we speak. Other updates in Florida marijuana policy on November 5th, 224. Well, I think everybody knows this by now, but I just have to keep saying we beat the marijuana industry, and there wasn't any recreational marijuana in 2024. Amendment 3 did not pass. In 2026, Smart and Safe Florida collected signatures, but they were rejected, so that it will not be on the 2026 ballots. But we have to continue our education, research-based, and we have to let parents know, everyone know the impacts, especially on the developing brain, but also what happens in the recreational states. We have to keep drumming that in so that if it ever gets on the ballot again, everyone will know. And here's some resources. My last slide on marijuana update, I have to talk a little bit about how marijuana affects the developing brain. Our next speakers will go into more detail on some of the side effects of marijuana on both youth and all the way up to seniors. But the use changes the brain. It changes the brain volume. It changes how the brain develops. If used before age 15, there's a greater risk of short and long-term memory deficits. Adolescent marijuana use associated with increased risk for mental illness, depression, suicide, schizophrenia, and a really terrible effect of, and it's caused by marijuana, there's research showing it, is psychosis. And there's a decline in IQ and educational performance. We just have to get this message out, especially to parents, so that they can make sure their kids, even if they try it once or start, they have to be told stop. Up until especially age 21, they're so damaging to the developing brain. Next, I'm going to talk to you about Delta 8 THC. What is Delta 8 THC? Some of you have heard me speak before, and I think by now we all know what it is, but it's around because of a loophole in the federal farm bill. It's sold in gas stations, convenience stores, smoke shops, pretty much everywhere, restaurants, bars. I'm seeing it in grocery stores. Produces intoxicating effects just like marijuana, not enough oversight. And some of the products are not pure. They don't even contain what it says on the label, but they do have pesticides and solvents. So we got to get that message out. And there's other isomers besides Delta 8, Delta 10, THCO, THCP. The products look very kid-friendly, although I must say in Florida that laws have been passed and rules have been written to try to rein the industry in and make it less kid-friendly. It is looking better. So, but there's still bright colors, fruit flavors, and it comes everything in edibles, Slurpees, vape products, smokable. It's basically a form of marijuana, in my opinion. It's hemp, but because of the loophole, it's very similar to marijuana sold in gas stations. When I first found out about this, it was 2022. I can't believe it was that long ago, but I heard of a child that got poisoned by this in Florida, and I thought, what is this stuff? So I went to smoke shops right in my local area, and I found these products. And I'm very glad to say that because of the crackdown in Florida, I don't see the Skittles and the Nerds Rope anymore. So they really have cracked down on those, but we still have to watch out because the gummies are there and the THC levels are very high. For example, look at the Demon gummies, 7,000 milligrams per package. So it isn't a ripoff of a brand name, but it's still super concentrated in THC. And when we talk about concentrates and oil, that's what's in these gummies. And the Trap Trees, one gummy, 1,000 milligrams of THC. And just for a reference, back in the 70s, a joint had 10 milligrams of THC. So these are packed, and until we can put a limit on THC in Florida or completely ban these, this is what we have to deal with. We have to get the word out. These products would send a child to the emergency room. The latest trend is into hemp THC beverages. I'm finding them in Circle K. The first time I went in, when I heard about this year, there was only one can left to show you how popular they are. But THC in sodas and seltzers right in your grocery stores, including Winn-Dixie. And I found out they had a huge case of it in my local Winn-Dixie. They had it in the ad. That's how I knew about it. And one of my friends went in and talked to the manager and complained, but it's still there. I wanted to talk a little bit about the social marketing. Once you Google these things, they show up on Facebook and Instagram. Okay, so I'm just trying to do my research, right? But apparently they think I want to buy it. So Delta is a very popular drink. The shelf upgrade, and you see all your beautiful bright colors of this Delta drink that has THC in it, 0 calories, 0 sugar, 0 alcohol. So they really promote these products as being alcohol-free and healthy. And this one really, I do not like at all, but it's a floating duck that you can take in your pool and put your Delta drink in it from the company that makes this. This is coming up. I think all of us need to look in our communities and see if there's any 710 Dab Day events in your town. This is what we have in Tampa, the 710 Dabathon. And it is at the Cuban Club in Tampa. And I still am trying to wrap my head around this. I'm not sure if I'm going to go undercover or if I'm going to call the police. I don't know. But they're just going to be celebrating marijuana oils all night long. And it's actually on 7-Eleven. It's going to be, I think, the whole weekend. And I wanted to point out Grow Healthy is a medical marijuana dispensary, and they're a sponsor of this event. So the hemp industry and the medical marijuana industry have some ties. And in fact, True Leaf and Cure Leaf are selling hemp THC drinks. So Dab Day, you can see who they're promoting this to, the young people, right? This was on their Instagram. And the FDA, they're always great with these strong warnings, and they tell you about the serious side effects, everything from dizziness to high blood pressure to rapid heart rate to coma, but they aren't doing anything about it, even though it's not FDA approved. They're not taking it off the shelf. And I wanted to show the poison exposures, and Dr. Wendy will talk about this more as far as some local information and statewide. But you can see it's just going through the roof since 2018. These are exposures of adults and children in the state of Florida from these products. And a lot of these are emergency room visits, hospital visits, and they're just calls to the poison centers. So this is why we are doing this. This is why we're educating everyone. And we don't want a parent to find out about these products because their child ends up in the emergency room. And this is why I started digging into this topic when I saw this article in 2022, and this child visiting from Ohio with his family ended up in the emergency room because he had a cake pop with THC in it. And I thought, how can this happen in Florida? We don't have recreational marijuana, but it was the loophole in the hemp bill. And some good news, it's sort of good and bad. So in November, when the federal government was reopened, there was a clause that said the Farm Bill loophole, it didn't say exact words, but the loophole is closed. So what they did is all the intoxicating hemp products are banned, Delta 8, all of those, only 0.4 milligrams THC per package. Remember, I was showing you packages that had 7,000 milligrams of THC. So this would eliminate these intoxicating hemp products, and it only allowed basically CBD with a tiny bit of THC in it. The opponents, which is the hemp industry, which by the way, they have a huge lobby, they say this will just destroy the entire hemp industry if they can't sell intoxicating products. Well, I say sell building materials, clothing. Let's get back to that like everyone thought when hemp was legalized. And then smart approaches to marijuana, CADCA, and coalitions are trying to push this forward and close the loophole. And thanks to everyone who worked on that. The new law, they gave them 1 year to get ready for this. November 2026 is when it's supposed to happen. But the opponents are actively up in not Tallahassee, but in DC trying to stop the implementation or maybe push it out another year. And that's the end of my presentation. So if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. Thank you.
Ellen, excellent presentation. Last year was my first year seeing some of the things that you shared, and it was just shocking to see some of the marketing that you've come across. I mean, I'm still stuck on the 7,000 milligrams of THC. Before we move on, there was really an important question asked, Ellen, and maybe you can answer this. Someone asked if they see some of these products, they come across them in the store, like who is the agency that they should report it to, if it seems like it's being targeted towards children?
That's a great question. And it's the Florida Department of Agriculture. The initials are FDACS, FADACS. And you can go online and you go under their food regulations, and there's a complaint form because hemp is considered a food and they do have to get a permit to sell it. So anything you see, and I've done this, you just fill out the complaint form online and put it in, and they will send an inspector to that store. And sometimes they actually send me a copy of the report, and they are very detailed. They're checking the labels. If they're kid friendly, they make them throw them away. So it's definitely worth doing. If you see anything you're concerned about, please contact the Florida Department of Agriculture.
Awesome. Ellen, thank you so much. All right, our next speaker this afternoon, I am happy to introduce Dr. Wendy Stephan. So Dr. Stephan serves as the educator and epidemiologist for the Florida Poison Information Center in Miami. For the past 17 years, she has promoted poison prevention and awareness while working to prevent poisonings related to medications, household chemicals, environmental hazards, and emerging substances. Now, she earned her doctorate in epidemiology and her Master of Public Health degree from the University of Miami, and currently serves as the board of directors for America's Poison Centers. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Wendy Stephan. It is so good to see you again.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Stephanie, for the introduction. It's a pleasure to join you. So yeah, we're fascinating to hear from Ellen about some of the legislative changes because, we definitely see the results. We see, things changing, and sometimes we don't even know why they're changing, but we definitely see on the clinical side, the exposures and who's being exposed and how they're being exposed evolve over time. And so we know that, these policies can be very powerful tools for prevention and protecting public health. And different states have had taken different approaches to it. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. Okay, great. So you see the Poison Center's website is there at the bottom, and my email. I'll put that again at the end if anybody is interested in learning more about what we do at the Poison Control Center and how that relates to different types of cannabinoids. Right. So we definitely do get calls about these products. So we're going to take a look. I wanted to say a few words about how this data is being collected. And so all of the references I'm going to be making to poisonings in this presentation are calls that have been voluntarily made to the Poison Helpline, which is 1-800-222-1222. Many people think of us as being just for small children and chemicals and cleaners, but in fact, our number one type of call now is actually about a pain medicine. So, and that can be for an adult or an older adult or a child. Certainly parents call us, but really anyone can call us. Our services are fast. You're immediately talking to a doctor. And so that's why people are calling us, is because they want to know what to do, right? They're dealing with something they didn't expect. Somebody is not feeling well, and they're scared often. And so we're the voice of calm and clear advice about, okay, this is normal. This is what we actually expect from this product, or this is not unusual. And really, you do need to seek help for these particular symptoms. All right, so you are speaking to either a doctor, nurse, or pharmacist when people call. The services are confidential. So when I saw that question about who do we report this to, I was like, not us, because our calls, when you call, you're speaking to a medical professional. So all of the communications that you're having with us are HIPAA protected, essentially. So we are not turning that information over, which makes us a really powerful resource for reporting things that may not be strictly legal. So feel free to call. Okay, and you see our logo there. That's the Poison Help logo for the number nationwide. So we have some strengths that our data, is really good at picking up. And so it's basically real time. So I was actually looking this morning at data on calls to the Poison Center as of today. And so we can really pick up different trends and things as they're happening. So very, very useful for emerging data. It's also standardized reporting, right? So we've been using the same data collection system over many, many years. So when we see changes in our data, it's not because we're doing things differently, it's because people's behavior is changing. And that's very interesting to know. We do oversample for kids. So people tend to know about us in the context of pediatric health. So we do get more calls about children, but not exclusively. You'll see we do get calls from people across the life cycle. All right. Novel substances, we tend to get calls about, when something is new on the market, when it's a new product or a new drug. So the hospitals know very well how to treat an opioid overdose, for instance. But when they started seeing these edible exposures and these children who were really, really sick from, what they were being told was marijuana, we were getting those calls because they were like, what is this? Like, we've just not seen this before. We didn't expect this. And certainly the parents and the families didn't expect it either. There are some limitations to the numbers I'll be sharing. So there is no requirement for people to call in to the Poison Center, either from home when they're dealing with something or even in the hospitals. So it is always voluntary. So we recognize this is not a complete count. And there are many, many people in the community who are using these products who are not having a bad experience or have a bad experience, but we never hear about it. So there are some limitations, okay? And again, we may undersample for illegal exposures because people hesitate to call when they realize they're doing something that is technically illicit. Okay, so some limitations that we always like to just let people know. So as Ellen just touched on, cannabinoids are very powerful substances, and we do have receptors actually throughout our nervous system. And there are hundreds of different types of cannabinoids. And of course, the most well-known is tetrahydrocannabinol, which is THC delta 9, is kind of the one that is best studied, even though not necessarily here in the US because we've not been able to study it. But now we're also seeing the intoxicating hemp products that Ellen referred to, which include the delta 8, but also things like THC THCO, THCP, and CBD. Although our calls for CBD, I have to say, have declined pretty markedly over the years. And so those products are still out there, but we're not receiving as many calls. And part of that is just regulatory, how frequently the products are being sold. Okay, so when does cannabis or its components become toxic? And so really it's a lot about dose. And I think we talk about the different formulations, whether it's a smoked form or an edible form, but it's all about dose, and particularly when someone is new to cannabis, right? Any of the cannabis products. So that's obviously small children who are naive to it and get into a family member's product. Somebody's bought it, brought it home, and now suddenly it's available to someone who it shouldn't be. And so, I think law enforcement at the beginning, they were warning that, that these drug dealers were coming for your kids. But our experience, and I shared this with them, is like, it's not really strangers that we're worrying about, right? These products are being brought into the home, by family members, loved ones, guests, visitors, tourists, and they're available in their handbags, on the bedside tables, in the medicine cabinet. And so the narrative was a little confusing or a little different from some of the other anti-drug messaging we do, is that, these are things that these are incidental exposures, often of people close to the child. Okay. Older adults is another population that I think is worth mentioning. Obviously, here we're talking a lot about youth and prevention, but we're also getting calls from older adults who've been marketed these products for health purposes. So Ellen showed us a lot of things that are geared toward youth, right? But there also is a very big marketing effort toward older adults, say, hey, this is going to control your pain. This is going to help you sleep. This is going to help you with anxiety. And there is some basis for that in the literature, in the medical literature. But again, dosage, we do get calls from older adults who are really shocked by the intensity and the symptoms that they feel when they take these products. Okay, let's see. So this is looking at 10 years of experience, sort of, in terms of different types of cannabis exposures. And so you see the edibles really dominate. Certainly, we do still get calls about the flower, the dried and undried plant products. So second to the edibles, but edibles really have dominated. And we're going to show how the time trend has really changed. So the third column there, you do see we are getting calls about concentrated extracts. But I would make a point that same as what Ellen said, is that a lot of the edible products, that is what's in the edibles, is the concentrated oil. So that you're sort of seeing those in two places, in the edible gummy format, for instance, but also in the direct consumption or burning of the oils and butters. And so, less common, but certainly out there. We also see exposures through skin contact with creams on lotions and that type of thing. And then vaped products, although quite a bit less often than some of the others. And then, of course, there are oral capsules and pills. We don't see those very frequently because those are often prescribed and a lot more controlled in terms of who's taking them and how they're taking them. Okay, here's the time trend. So you really see that, as of 2017, where we started sort of splitting these and looking, we've always recorded cases of dried and undried plant material, the flower. But really, you see the big growth since 2017, particularly of the edibles. Just very, very appealing. Remember, youth value novelty and creativity. So the colorful, the interesting marketing that Ellen showed, this is very appealing to youth, and a sense that other kids are doing it and they're seeing it online, and it's creating this idea that everybody's doing it, which we know from data actually is not true. So the FISUS, the Florida Youth Substance Abuse Survey, just came out statewide for 2025, and it is certainly not the majority. So when we look at ever used from high school students, marijuana, it's 15%. So I think that's important to keep in mind. Sometimes we can sound like, oh my gosh, everybody's doing this. This is a catastrophe. But the data doesn't seem to align with that. And that's an important message for youth, that if you choose not to use this, you're actually in the majority. So when we talk about peer pressure, if you look at that, then the peer pressure really should go the other way. But you see some increase in the concentrates there in the blue, but nothing like what we've seen in these more appealing, sugary, gummy drink and other formulations. Okay, so when we look at the ages of the calls that we're getting, the people who we're getting calls about with the edibles, you see a pretty large pediatric representation. So, including the 0 to 5s, which we really worry about because these children are small. So by virtue of being very light, like their weight is low, they're getting a much larger dose than, say, someone my size. And so about a third of those calls are for our 0 to 5s. Again, very appealing. You can see why a child would be interested in those. Even if they're not colorful, it looks a bit like a sugar cube and it's squishy. So if it's left out, children are definitely interested. But then another 36% or so are of our older children and teens. But I would point out, almost a third of our calls are grown-ups who have taken these edibles and are not enjoying it, right? They're experiencing symptoms they weren't expecting. Again, linking back to the dose, just that these are much stronger than I think many people expect. Okay, looking at the concentrated extracts, a larger proportion of these are those adults. And when people are using concentrated, the butters, the oils, these tend to be more sophisticated users and intentional users that they know what they're buying. They've sought it out, but we still get a lot of these calls because, again, issues of strength and unexpected symptoms. And so we'll go into that here in the next slide. Okay, so when we see symptoms, the types of symptoms we hear about that are linked, toxicologically with cannabis. So under 1 milligram per kilogram, we tend to see what people expect, which is sort of the stoned type affect, right? People are sleepier, they're lethargic, they're sort of mellow, whatever. And so that is actually central nervous system depression, actually similar to what you might see with alcohol. Once you get over 4 milligrams per kilogram, you start to see some neurological involvement, central nervous system, right? So more serious systemic effects, and that can easily happen when a small child gets into one or more of the edibles. Okay, so from the concentrated extracts, I pulled up this data. This is showing this range, a wide range of effects that are reported associated with the extracts. So everything from mild to moderate central nervous system depression, which means slowed heart rate, slowed breathing, sort of, more sort of loss of, cognition, essentially everything slowed down from, agitation, right, which is often from anxiety, that people realize they're feeling weird and things that they don't expect, and it makes people very anxious. We can see visual disturbances. Sometimes people refer to them as hallucinations, but they're not typically a true hallucination compared to other drugs that actually will create fully formed, images, pink elephants and whatever. With cannabis, it tends to be visual disturbances, intensity of color, auras, and things like that. So it's not a true hallucination in our parlance. All right. Certainly, nausea, vomiting can happen. Right, your body has detected this stuff and it's reacting, and it can trigger vomiting. Okay, confusion, dizziness, and rapid heart rate, often associated with anxiety. Okay, so generally not the cool, relaxed, chill experience that people are hoping for. Certainly, if we're getting a call, it means something is not very fun. Okay, so how do the oral forms differ from the inhaled forms? I think the biggest difference we see at the Poison Center when we're looking at our poison patients is not so much the oil versus the edible versus the plant matter. The issue is consumed versus inhaled. And so the problem with the inhaled or the swallowed form is that there is quite a delay in terms of peak blood concentration, which is a 2 to 4 hour peak. But then the symptoms can continue to intensify up to 6 hours. So this, you can really see how it is with the smoked form. People are smoking and they're getting sort of a 15-minute lag between the smoking and the feelings. So that's a much more rapid turnaround where they can sense, okay, I've had enough, right? Or I don't like how this is feeling, I can stop. Whereas with the edibles, people will unfortunately take more edibles because they think it's not working or it's not strong. And by the time it kicks in, they can feel really rotten. And so really it's about rapid heart rate, central nervous system depression, agitation, and vomiting is what we typically will see with just too much of the edibles. Okay, so big delay and can really, you can see this overconsumption problem. And just generally, with a smoked effect, you don't really see children smoking it. Right? Maybe they eat it, but they're just not going to eat as much because really, if you think of the weed, it's like broccoli, right? They're not going to necessarily overeat that. All right, so that just sort of gives you a peek as to what we're seeing and how we're helping people. I just took a look at our data this morning, as I mentioned, and at our Miami Center, we've treated 291 patients so far for cannabinoid exposure this year, and that's of all ages, and that included, small children up to teens and even people in their later years. So we're definitely there to help if anyone needs assistance. We have a flyer online. You can see this is the one that we're using for medical marijuana safety. If people are choosing to bring this home, just reminding them that they do need to keep it out of reach of teens and children. It should be locked up really with other medications. Okay, we have lots of information there at floridapoisoncontrol.org. This PDF is downloadable in English and Spanish, so please spread the word about medical marijuana safety and cannabis safety.
Dr. Stephan, thank you so much. Such an insightful presentation. I'm actually really surprised by you sharing that 15% of youth are using, because I feel like, even in my own reporting, sometimes it feels like everyone's doing it, but it is good to know that only, based off of data from last year, was only 15%. Before I let you go, there was one question that I thought was interesting. It was sort of a clarification question in your presentation. Someone asked if other neuro is considered psychosis.
So, our data is acute, effects. So that tends to be within the first hours. And so it is very difficult for us to attribute, over a period of hours with only a call and without a complete medical record, psychosis to that particular exposure. What we've seen in sort of our history, certainly if we think back to the issue where the person attacked somebody in Miami and actually ate chunks of this other person's face, and there was a lot of, this was years ago, where there was a lot of sort of, talk about, new or scary drugs and cathinones and bath salts and what terrible drug was he on. The drug results that were released to the public, that was not just to us, but it was only marijuana that he was on. And so for him, it might have been interacting with existing mental health problems or predispositions. And there's clinical data, research not from poison centers, but longer term studies that show that psychosis presents younger in populations who are using marijuana. So essentially, is it causing it, or is it bringing it on in someone who already has, either a genetic predisposition or other predisposition to psychosis? So it is not super clear, but it's not something that we tend to hear about sort of like instantly within hours of exposure.
Fascinating. Thank you so much, Dr. Stephan. Okay, and our final speaker today, I'm so excited to welcome Amy Ronshausen. She is the Chief Executive Officer and Executive Director of Drug Free America Foundation and Save Our Society from Drugs. She has led grassroots advocacy campaigns, analyzed drug policy legislation, trained prevention professionals globally, and frequently provides testimony on drug demand reduction initiatives around the world. She currently serves as the international president of the World Federation Against Drugs and representing more than 450 organizations across 71 countries. In 2023, she was appointed by Governor Ron DeSantis to Florida's statewide Council on Opioid Abatement, and in 2025, she received Florida's Hero Award for her work in prevention. Please help me welcome Amy Ronshausen. Amy, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you for having me, and such great presentation so far. I'm working on sharing my screen, but a shout out to Ellen, who always does such an amazing job on these issues and really is somebody that I go to globally and send people around the world to her for some of these issues. And also to the Florida Poison Control. I mean, this is a really great resource for us, for people working in drug demand reduction, to get such good data so that we can make sure that all of our talking points are always research and data driven, and make sure that we're on top of what's happening in our communities. And, while she said that this is just a small part of it, because, the people, we don't know who's not calling and what's not happening, just having the data that they're able to get and to break that down into the different categories is really just phenomenal. And we're just so grateful for that resource. So thank you. Okay, I think I'm set up. So I'm going to be a lot shorter, I think, and leave it room for some questions because a lot of stuff has already been talked about. But I really want to emphasize how this landscape has changed. We've had more change in the last 15 years than we have in the previous 50 years around the issue of marijuana when it comes to the different products that are available, the way people are using, consumption patterns, THC patterns, potency issues. And, we're looking at, as we saw in both presentations, concentrates, oils, vape products, edible products, and then, of course, still the raw flower. And this is just, at THC levels that were unheard of even just one generation ago. So I'm going to show a little bit about the potency levels. So THC potency has increased dramatically over the past 2 decades, and it really depends on the product. It could be anywhere from 4 to 20 times stronger than it was just a generation ago. Marijuana was once classified as a depressant, and now it's been reclassified as a stimulant, a depressant, and hallucinogen. So you can see that as the products change, and as what science shows us, what the data shows us, so do the way that we categorize things. And if you see from the chart, the sharp rise in THC levels really isn't by accident. If you're looking at the years, 2012 really coincides with when the nation saw a really concentrated effort in commercialized and for-profit marijuana markets across the US. And so when you introduce that commercialization, as with anything that is in a free market, you have competition, you have to have bigger, badder, better products. And one of the ways that they do that is by making products that have higher THC rates. Ellen mentioned one of our colleagues, Sam, so I want to also talk about them and a resource that they've provided. It's Smart Approaches to Marijuana. You can see their website here. They are a phenomenal resource for great reports and on different topics. But here, a recent report that they just shared shows that, it kind of breaks this down in a way that's easily understandable. So we look at the flower from the 1970s, what we call Woodstock weed, and we have an average of 3% THC. We move to today's flower, which is on average 18 to 23% THC. In 2017, when we saw these concentrates really heavily emerge onto the market, we were looking at an average of 56% THC. Today, it could be anywhere between 95 and 99% when we look at the oils and the butters and the things that both presenters were talking about that's being put into a lot of these edible products. And so when we're talking about potency, why does that matter? Like what's the big deal with the potency? So it's not just simply the use of marijuana. It's really the exposure to these unprecedented levels of THC during that really critical period of brain development. So as potency increases, the risks associated with that also increase. So I've been in this drug demand reduction field for quite some time, and this age just keeps creeping up on us on when the brain is truly developed. And so when we look at early brain studies, they showed that there was a lot of brain changes during the teenage years. Those studies mostly followed people until they were 20. So scientists believe that brain development was mostly finished by the mid-20s. However, newer studies using advanced brain imaging and much larger groups of people show that there are really important parts of brain development, especially those involved in decision-making, self-control, and the communication between the different brain regions that continues to develop and become more efficient all the way into our early 30s. And some studies are showing that for men, for young males, this is even a little bit longer than it is for females. And so that's why addressing these issues during adolescence and during that young adulthood is really important. At least 56 studies have linked these high-potency products, high-potency marijuana, to psychosis. A landmark study that was done in 2019 by The Lancet followed the risk of psychosis, and it showed that it triples when you're looking at 15% or more THC rates, and that daily users, so it's not just the use, it's also the consumption patterns, that daily users are 5 times more likely to develop a severe mental health illness. And then one of the things that I wanted to touch on, which is a little different, but it's often a population that we don't think about when we talk about these issues, but is really important. And I want to spend just a little bit of time on it today because it's really one of the fastest growing areas of concern, and one for us at Drug Free America Foundation that we've really invested significant effort on. Many women are being told that marijuana use is safe, or, it's natural, safe, or safer than prescription medications when it comes to nausea, anxiety, or sleep. Unfortunately, the science doesn't support that safety of marijuana use during pregnancy or breastfeeding. And in fact, there's no safe amount during this time period when this life is developing inside of you. When marijuana is used, regardless of the method, whether it's edibles, smoking, vaping, THC crosses the placenta and travels rapidly to the fetus's brain and fat cells. THC binds to those receptors within the internal endocannabinoid system, which plays a really significant role in the central nervous system development. And we heard about how THC impacts central nervous system from the data from the Florida Poison Control. So marijuana use during pregnancy can harm the fetus's brain development and can have long-term effects on cognition and behavior. So I wanted to make sure that we put this in there because oftentimes we talk about prevention starting when somebody first initiates into use, but really prevention begins at the first opportunity to support healthy development, and that opportunity starts before birth. These are protective factors that we can establish early on and that we can reinforce throughout somebody's whole lifespan. It isn't just prevention just isn't about speaking to middle school people, and even the last presentation talked on this. There is data from, elderly populations my age, we can't forget everybody needs to be educated on these issues. Of course, when we talk about the developing brain, our focus is on adolescents and young adults. And we know that if we can keep people from not using during that time, especially until they're 18 or preferably till 21, the data shows us that they're less likely to have problematic use into adulthood. So I get why we focus on that area, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but also we need to understand that this goes through the lifespan. So evidence tells us the prevention works best when it starts early and continues. It continues through open conversations, rather than just those one-time things that sometimes you see at a school event and it's a one-time issue. Younger people consistently report, whether adults believe this or not, that parents and trusted adults really are one of their most important sources of information and influence. So young people do care about the adults in their lives and what they think, and they do look to it could be one trusted adult, it could be a family member, it could be a teacher. They look to that adult for meaningful advice and as a role model, which means that listening is a really powerful tool. So it's not just talking to people and lecturing. It's really critical that adults listen and that they understand today's products, which I think is what's great about today. It really is giving people, at least a stepping stone on what's out there, what's out in our communities, and what they can learn about those, including these high potency marijuana concentrates, the vapes, the edibles, which really are different from a lot of substances that, people my age or other parents or even grandparents might even know about. So using trusted science-based resources really helps families and communities provide that accurate information. So we want to make sure that we're not, lecturing, we're not providing, something based on politics or belief systems, that it really is about the science, it really is about the research, so that people can make the most informed decision. And that remembering that communities really are a protective factor, making sure that you have an engaged community, an informed community, and that you're connecting all the activities and the different partnerships in the community to really help strengthen any kind of prevention strategy. So I just want to quickly talk about a little bit how Drug Free America is responding. As I said earlier, we recognize that families and providers need evidence-based resources rather than opinions and politics. A lot of our resources, especially around this issue, we were fortunate enough to be able to create through a partnership with the Florida Department of Health, especially when it comes to our marijuana and pregnancy initiative. We have all kinds of one-pagers and resources that are available in English, Spanish, and Haitian Creole, and therefore healthcare providers, for parents and families, for community members. In Florida, we've been able to disseminate over 100,000 of our printed resources throughout the communities, and that's by partnering with really great organizations around the state of Florida that are doing the on-the-ground work. So they can get this out there. And last month alone, our Florida campaign reached more than 350,000 targeted advertising impressions, with more than 25,000 clicks to our website and downloads to our one-pagers. So what that shows me is that these issues really are important, and events like today really help educate families and individuals who are looking for information, and that it's really vital that they're seeing it from trusted sources and not just from an industry who's profiting off of addiction. So I really commend the work that everybody, who put this on today is doing, and for everybody who tuned in, because really educating yourself and staying up on these issues is really half the battle, so that you can help somebody else in your life. And even if it's just that one person, I hope that you feel like I feel, that it was worth sitting through an hour webinar and getting some information. Hopefully it's more than one person, but even if it was just one person, it's time well spent. So thank you, and I really appreciate being able to be here.
Amy, thank you so much. Excellent presentation. I saw someone in the chat say they would love to share this information with people that they work with. So definitely check the chat to see if you guys can connect. Now, we want to switch over to our Q&A portion. I am going to ask the speakers, to answer the questions and try to maybe keep it as concise as possible, just so we can get to as many questions as possible this afternoon. The first two I'm going to ask, they were submitted, and then we'll get into the questions that were dropped in the chat. So stay tuned for that. I'll try to get to as many as possible. But the first question that was submitted is, how are we educating youth and parents in our communities about drugs, alcohol, substance misuse, and their effects? And I'll open it up to our speakers today.
Okay, I'll take a stab at that one. I think a lot of the people on the line that are watching this today are with community coalitions that fight substance misuse, especially among youth. So it's a matter of getting out there into the community. In the summer, honestly, even though school's out, it's a great time to get out to the back to school fairs, get to the Boys and Girls Clubs, to the summer camps, to the coaches that are, having kids practice over the summer. We just have to be innovative in how to get the word out. And then, like a presentation like this, it's recorded, you can share it. Also, all of us would, I'm sure, be glad to speak to your community, especially if we can do it virtually, or if it's in the area, we can travel. But just getting the word out. But you have to educate yourself, just like Amy said. You have to know what's going on, what the trends are, so that you can educate, especially the parents, because a lot of times they are caught totally off guard by these trends.
Ellen, thank you.
Another thing I just wanted to mention, we do have something in Hillsborough County, and I know several coalitions across the state have Hidden in Plain Sight, and it's a really good presentation. It can be either a trailer that's a child's room that shows where things might be hidden, or a backpack, and that's another great way to get the word out.
If Wendy or Amy don't have more to add to that, I'm happy to move on to the next question. Okay, so the next question is, what advice do you have for parents navigating these conversations with their children?
So this is Amy. I can start with this one. I think that they're conversations. So the first part is to have conversations and not lectures. And we all get really passionate about these issues. So sometimes I know that that's hard, and it doesn't have to be a awkward. We're all going to have the drug talk at dinner tonight, and we're going to sit down at this table. They could be 1 minute conversations, especially in our communities. Like we pass a whole bunch of dispensaries when we drive down the street. We see the signs for these products that are sold at gas stations. We go in to pay for gas and we see all these products inside the gas station. So it's a really great opportunity for parents to start that conversation by saying, hey, do you know about these products? What do you and your friends think about this? Like, what do you know about this? And let them tell you some stuff because chances are they know more than you. And their information might not be accurate, but they know a lot about the topic. So hear what they have to say, really try to and I can imagine as a parent, if you hear these things, you automatically, oh, and you want to shout what the best thing is, but try to take a step back and just really keep yourself calm and say, oh, that's interesting. Well, let me tell you what I heard about it. And today you can find everything online, right? So this is a great opportunity also to sit down with your children and look at the things online together and determine what is a real resource and what is fake news. And who's putting the information out there, and can they be trusted, or is this just marketing from the industry? And how that teaches them a really great life skill, not just on this issue, but on other things, on how to find information. So the short answer is have conversations, not lectures, really be open and really listen and use the opportunities that you see in our community to start those conversations.
Excellent advice. Ellen, Wendy, anything to add?
Yeah, I echo everything Amy just said, but I would also say, in the prevention world, we often talk a lot about don't, like just don't, but I think we also have to prepare for kids for what to do if they need to help a friend. And South Florida Opioid Alliance and we have been in a lot of schools and in libraries and whatever throughout South Florida, and we get the best engagement when we say, this could happen to your friend. This is what you need to look for. This is how you need to get help. So we talk a lot about the Good Samaritan law, for instance, and that is where they lock in because they care a lot about each other and about peers. And so we say, if you have questions or you've heard something and you're not sure that's true, or somebody said, here, try this, it's going to help you study, you can talk to the Poison Center for free, confidentially, and you're talking to somebody who really knows. So one of those calls came into us, and this poor young person was driving around and she was saying, I'm paranoid. She felt that she had taken a drug. It turned out probably to be, one of these novel drugs of abuse. It was an amphetamine type, hallucinogenic amphetamine, but she thought it was interacting with her acne medicine. So she knew something was wrong, and it was just creating this terrible paranoia that she felt people were chasing her. And we had to explain that is actually typical for the drug. So the paranoia you're experiencing is what we would expect from this. So go home, go with somebody that you trust, right? So the fact that she knew to call, that she got actual information, not from, a website that's sort of promoting the use of the substance, but from an actual healthcare provider. And so it's very empowering. I think we want to empower youth beyond just saying no or trying to choose well for themselves, but also how do they help each other, right? So maybe they should be carrying Narcan, for instance. These are empowering tools, ways that we can love our young people and help them love each other.
Okay, I want to get to the chat questions now. So someone left this question. If there is a parent who has edibles not locked up, should they be reported somewhere, and where?
So that is not our department. So, we want people to call us and get help. So we advertise our service as confidential, and we are not breaking confidentiality for these type of situations any more than we would for a child who got into a cleaning product or, ate a berry in the park or whatever. Like, I'm a parent. I think we all have, those of us who have been parents, we've seen things go wrong with things in the home and felt bad, right? So certainly there's a lot of, we get a lot of tearful parents on the phone at the Poison Center. And really the last thing they need is us, sort of saying that they're going to get in trouble or get, busted for something. That being said, there are situations that do represent neglect and abuse, right? And some of our child fatalities have been the result of these very tragic situations, methadone in a sippy cup type situations. But those are investigated by our healthcare providers, child protection teams. So in an ED setting where they can do interviews, they can look at the child's health records, they can do tests. We can't do any of that over the phone. So there is the abuse hotline, the state of Florida. If you believe you're observing something where a child is in danger, you can report it to the abuse hotline, and they can handle it from there. But we don't have a role in that, because we want everyone to call us, no matter how bad they feel about what just happened.
I would also say that this kind of triggers a new question for parents, really. So, like when I was a kid, and I'm 52 years old, if I was going to spend the night at a friend's house, my parents had to meet that parent, right? Or have a phone call with that parent, but meet that parent. So this kind of poses some new questions that you, as a parent, you might want to ask if your child is playing at that house or spending the night at that house. And, not just on this issue, it could be other issues that are safety concerning as well. Like, no judgment, but do you have any kind of marijuana products in the house that are at arm's reach for a child? And, see what they say. It might trigger them to say, oh yeah, I am a medical marijuana patient and I do have some of these products. I'll make sure that they're locked up with my other medications, or no, I don't have that in my house. But it's an important question now for parents to kind of ask because of these accidental exposures, because let's face it, a cookie or a Jolly Rancher or a soda pop is intriguing to me and to and to kids. And so they're just going to see a cookie. They're not going to see that it's something harmful for them. So it's also another conversation to have, with other parents.
Yeah, and I agree with everything that you both have said. And I think also that we just have to get the word out better about medical marijuana, especially, and hemp products, that they do need to be locked up. And further, not just out of your good heart and keeping away from kids, you can be arrested. If a child gets into that and gets into trouble and ends up in the emergency room, it can be traced back to you. So whatever it takes, it's kind of like what we did with underage drinking. Like don't serve in your home and don't let a child underage drink. Same thing with these marijuana products. It is against the law, even if it's accidental. If you're leaving it out within a child's reach and they end up in the emergency room, you can be held responsible. So I think we need to have it as a conversation with other parents, have, just like Amy said, call if your child's going over to another home. It's a whole new thing. We need to ask about, honestly, firearms in the home. We need to ask about marijuana, hemp products, alcohol. I mean, if parents don't want to answer those questions, don't let your kid go there.
Sorry, as a parent, Addis here. As a parent, I just quickly wanted to add that the Lock Your Meds campaign out there, it's funny, I never thought of as like you have to lock up your lollipops and your edibles too. So I guess that is interesting that she said that, because yeah, I think it should be definitely part of the campaign as well.
Well, thank you. We are out of time, but I want to thank our speakers and our community partners, and everyone who joined us today. This discussion really highlights the importance of how marijuana has changed in many of today's products, and how they contain high levels of THC that were, unheard of generations ago. As parents, educators, healthcare professionals, and community members, staying informed has really helped us make better conversations, make more informed decisions, and support young people, of course, as they navigate this very complex environment and society that we live in. So I want to thank everyone for being part of today's conversation, education. I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon. I am being told, though, that they're asking everyone to stay on and complete the survey that is in the chat. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of the questions, but I appreciate the ones that we were able to get to. And I want to thank Wendy, Amy, and Ellen for all of the insightful information today.
Thank you for joining us today for the important conversation about the changing cannabis landscape and what it means for our communities, families, and youth.